Okay, good evening. I guess. I won't complain. Okay, as in Judaism and Christianity, Islam, both Sunni and Shia, which you all remember the differences. I see. So when I get to the Shia ritual at the end, I'll say a few more things just to make sure you recognize, remember some of the differences. Contain a number of religious practices and rituals that form the core of community life. So tonight we'll be looking at 1, prayer, 2, fasting, 3, the celebrations of Eid, and I'll speak about those, what they are, 4, the circumambulation of the Kaaba and throwing of stones at Satan's pillars during the Hajj. The Hajj is the great pilgrimage. Those are 2 major rituals in that event. And then finally, we're going to look at the Shia mourning ritual, Mourning, called Ashura'a. So, Orthodox Muslims pray, and it's called Salat. Prayers in Arabic is Salat. They pray 5 times daily when they're required to recite prayers, which is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. 5 main things you have to do to be a Muslim. 1 is to pray 5 times daily. Often when I say this to groups, they go, 5 times you got to pray? Why 5 times? Why not just once and get it over with? Because in Islam, at least at the time of Muhammad, prayer was the focal point of your day. Everything else revolved around prayer. Because prayer is when you're in communication with Allah, which is the core of existence, so that your day should be structured around that. And if you go to any major Islamic, has anyone been to a major Islamic city here, or even Jerusalem? Have you ever heard the call to worship? It will be called 5 times a day, and it's over a loudspeaker, so everyone in the city can hear it. So it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. What are those times? Dawn. If you're sleeping and you're a tourist and you're in Cairo, you're going to, about 5 o'clock, you're going to hear the call to prayer, unless you have one of these rooms, suites, that's sort of sealed off from everything. Noon, afternoon, sunset, and evening. And it is believed that Muhammad set these times. So in Muslim cities, times of prayer are announced by what is known as a muezzin, who calls from the top of a minaret. And I'll be showing you some minarets later. The minarets are the large towers at the mosque. Before there were loudspeakers, these guys would get up and just call with their voices. Now today, with loudspeakers, you usually don't have anyone going up to the top, but they're loudspeakers. And the call is called the Adhan, A-D-H-A-N. And it's actually an art form. You don't just get anyone to go up there and sing the Adhan or announce the Adhan. You study to do that for years and years and years. So this is, if you happen to be in a Muslim city sometime and you happen to hear the call to worship, this is the translation in English. God is great, God is great, God is great. I bear witness there is no God except the one God. I bear witness there is no God except the one God. I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Hurry to prayer, hurry to prayer, hurry to salvation. God is great, God is great. There is no God except God. So that's what's called from, and that's when people come to prayer. And often coming to prayer is just in your own home. You only go, as we'll see in congregation, once a week, and that's at the mosque. So carrying out Salat is believed to connect each Muslim with all other Muslims. Why? Everyone's praying at the same time. All Muslims within a certain region of the clock are all praying at the same time. And these times are kept very very punctually. It's considered a sacred time. It's not like any other time. It's a sacred time. And this also extends to those who have uttered the words throughout history. So it's an attempt to unify the Muslim community. That's what Salat is. Prayer unifies the community. Now these prayers are set or prescribed. Everyone doesn't just get up and say their own prayer. They're prescribed. And they're not just phrases to be spoken. Prayer for a Muslim involves uniting mind, soul, and body in worship. So carrying out the prayers includes a series of ritualistic bodily positions that accompany the words. Note there are 7 different positions. So you're not just staying in one position. One round of positions is known as a rakat. So there's a rakat for each of those. So there's a series of prayers for each one of those bodily positions. So you're saying 7 rakats for your prayer. Individual prayer makes use of a prayer mat with worship always facing Mecca. There's a prayer mat on the left. What do you think that is on the right? That was from my hotel room when we were in Tunisia. Every hotel room will have that direction so people staying there know the direction to pray. Yeah, well, the idea is it's sort of like yoga. If you've done it for a long time, you're flexible. Yeah, if you start doing it when you're my age, you get what I got. So it's on. You know how you have a little side desk, this little corner. Yeah. That was in Tunis when we were there with Ali, pointing to Mecca. So individual prayer makes use of that prayer mat, and you're always facing Mecca. Let me give you an example of Salat. So this would be one round said 7 times. So you see, prayer is taken seriously. It's not something you say, let me say a quick prayer and get out of here. Okay? This is a ritualistic approach to prayer. Everyone is supposed to be doing this. Does everyone do it? Of course not. But this is the standard. So here it starts. Allahu Akbar. You ever heard that? God is great. Allahu Akbar. Glory be to you, Allah. And all praises are due unto you. And blessed is your name. And high is your majesty. And none is worthy of worship but you. I seek refuge with Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. You alone do we worship. And you alone do we ask for help. Lead us along the straight path, the path of those upon whom you have bestowed your favors, not of those who went astray. Say, He is God, the one and only God, the eternal, the absolute. He begets not. That's a reference to Christianity. He begets not, nor is he begotten, and there is none like him. May God honor Muhammad, Muhammad's family, as you honored Abraham and Abraham's family. Oh God, forgive me, my parents, and the believers, that we shall on the day of judgment be accountable. Do you notice one constant theme throughout that? The oneness of God. That's perhaps the most important theological position taken in Islam. Allah alone is worshipped. Muhammad isn't worshipped. Only Allah. So, that's individual prayer. Congregational prayer takes place at noon on Friday in a mosque. Friday is the holy day for Muslims, just like Saturday is for Jews and Sunday is for Christians. It's also at this time that there will be a sermon given by one of the mullahs or one of the leaders of the mosque. And sometimes those can get quite political. They can get quite political. So congregational prayer is considered to have more social and spiritual benefit than praying by oneself. Why? It's the power of the group. If you've ever been in a large group, it doesn't have to necessarily be religious. There's an energy there. And it's believed that this energy is really helping in terms of the prayer. So when praying in congregation, the people stand in straight parallel rows behind the chosen imam, and they face what is known as the Qibla in the mosque. It's the indented area because that's facing Mecca. Imam in Sunni Islam is not the same as Imam in Shia Islam, so I'll get to that later. Why was Friday? I think it was to distinguish themselves from Saturday, which was Jewish, and Sunday, which is Christian. No, they sit up. Yeah, but, yeah, and they know the ritual when to go on their knees and when to but the congregation does follow the actions of the imam. So he's sort of the leader. He's also saying the prayers, but he's also going through the movements so you can follow him. According to Muslim tradition, which is known as hadith. Does anyone remember when I talked about what a hadith is in Islam? But there's the Quran, which is the holy text. Then there are many, many, many hadith traditions. These are statements about either what Muhammad is said to have said or is said to have done according to eyewitnesses or a number of sources. So you might, because not everything is in the Quran, that takes precedence, but let's say there's something else, and one of the hadith says, so-and-so, who is a very well-known believer, saw Muhammad do this. And there are books of these things. Books. And they've been recorded over the centuries. In any case, one hadith said that Muhammad never missed a congregational prayer during his lifetime. He always went to congregate, even when he was ill. It says, even his sickness, when it was strenuous for him to walk, with the aid of two companions, he came to the mosque and led the prayer, the communal prayer. So prayer is really the central aspect of a Muslim's devotional life. There are all the other rituals we'll see. But it's because it's 5 times a day. If you're in a Muslim city, things will stop for about 15 minutes. A lot of businesses will close, construction will stop, and people will pray. Not everyone. Yeah, there will be women. I was asked, women are at the, but they have their separate section, just like in ancient Judaism, separate section for women. Men are usually closer to the front. Yeah. It's a chandelier. It's a chandelier.
It's a chandelier.
Yeah, yeah. If when I do religious art of Islam, I'm going to show you some of the most gorgeous mosques and chandeliers, and I mean, Muslim mosques around the world are some of the most beautiful artistic renditions you'll ever see. It's stunning, but that's a few weeks down the line. Okay. So there, you see, they're now raised up on their knees. They're not. That's it. The second ritual which we're going to look at is Ramadan. It's a period of fasting. That's the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. It involves not only fasting, your fasting, but periods of deep personal reflection. It's supposed to be a time of even deeper prayer. It's also the commemoration of the Prophet Muhammad's first revelation. So it has there's a memorial to this as well. It's regarded as one of the 5 pillars of Islam and lasts 29 to 30 days, from one sighting of the crescent moon to the next. Now, you're not fasting for 30 straight days. You're fasting each day from sunrise to sunset. And it's obligatory for all adult Muslims who are not acutely or chronically ill, traveling, elderly, or breastfeeding. If you're in any of those categories, the rules of the fast do not apply to you. So each morning begins with a pre-dawn meal. It's supposed to be a light meal. And the fast is broken each evening with another light meal. And it's considered extremely improper, you might say bad taste, to gorge oneself after the fast. You're missing the purpose of the fast if that's what you're doing. Moreover, there's a tradition where Muhammad said there's those who will fast and won't fast, and those who won't fast and who will fast. In other words, if all you're doing the whole day long is thinking about, God, I got to eat, you're not fasting. It's not the proper spirit. It's not the proper spirit.
So what time of year? You said the 9th month of their year.
Well, the thing is, Islam is on a lunar calendar, so it changes every year. And I'm not sure what Ramadan is this year. I should have looked that up.
Sometimes, from sunrise
Yeah.
to sunset is short.
Yeah.
And
that's right. So you pray that you're going to, yeah. And moreover, think when in some of these hot climates, because not only you're not supposed to eat, you're not supposed to drink, or smoke, or have sex. It's a time of inner reflection. Yeah, Chris. Yeah, no, yeah. People should devote themselves instead to prayer, recitation of the Quran, and the spiritual rewards are believed to be multiplied during this period. This is a period of intense inner reflection. Muslims also believe that Ramadan teaches them the practice of self-discipline, self-control, and empathy for others. This is what a lot of people experience every day around the world. We forget how many people really live on the starvation level even today. Africa, South Asia, many places. So it's supposed to also include that. And it often encourages actions of generosity and charity. It concludes with a major celebration known as al-Fitr, the holiday of breaking the fast. This is not mentioned in the Quran, but it is practiced worldwide by Muslims as it marks the end of Ramadan. It's known by different names in different countries. According to Muslim tradition, that's hadith, al-Fitr was first celebrated when it was announced by Muhammad after the migration of the young community from Mecca to Medina. It's known as the Hijrah, or the flight. You may remember that Muhammad came from Mecca. His religion began in Mecca, but then the leadership turned against him. He was forced with his community to go to Medina, which is about 200 miles north of Mecca. It's called the Hijrah. It's the beginning of the Islamic calendar. So it is said that when they arrived in Medina, and this is from Anas, a well-known companion of the Prophet, he narrated that when Muhammad arrived in Medina, he found the people celebrating 2 specific days in which they entertained themselves with recreation and merriment. And he remarked that Allah had fixed now 2 days for festivity every year. So at the end of the fast, it's 2 days of festivity. Traditionally, Eid al-Fitr begins at sunset on the night of the first sighting of the crescent moon. This year, that will start April 21st. It's celebrated for 1 to 3 days, depending on the country. It has a particular salat, which goes with it. That's a form of prayer. That concludes with 2 rakats, generally performed in an open field. So you can see all these. It's a pretty massive group here. Whoops. These are all. This is not working. No. These are all. This is taken from a blimp or something. These are all people. Yeah. It's a little closer. That's in a mosque. This is in an open field. Yeah. No, I think they're 12 months or no, yeah. No. It, like I said, it ties in with the first revelation of Muhammad. So depending on, now this is interesting, depending on the juristic opinion of the locality, there are 4 or 5 schools of Islam, legal schools, and they don't all agree on everything. And various commandments are divided into 3 categories. It's either seen as obligatory, it's either seen as semi-obligatory, or it's seen as preferable. So this is depends where you are. I'm pointing it out because this depends where you are. In Saudi Arabia, the more you move towards the west, Morocco, Turkey, a lot of the rules and regulations are considered preferable. So it's good that you do these, but you don't have to. A second major celebration is known, of course, there's the meal. And it's usually with family, by the way. Extended family will get together and celebrate that meal. The other great festival is Eid al-Adha, or Feast of the Sacrifice. It lasts 4 days. It will start on June 28th this year. It honors the willingness of Abraham to sacrifice his son Ishmael as an act of obedience to Allah's command. In the Hebrew Bible, who is it that is going to be sacrificed? Isaac. In the Quran, it is Ishmael. So that story varies a bit. There are a lot of similar stories from the Hebrew Bible found in the Quran, but they often take a little different slant. For the non-religious scholar, this is explained because as Muhammad was traveling the caravan routes, he came in touch with different religious groups, and he got different stories. That will not fly with the Orthodox devout Muslim. He will say that it comes from Allah. In any case, it's a very major festival. But as you know, before Abraham could sacrifice his son, as he was called to do, because of his willingness, Allah provided him with a lamb to sacrifice in its place. So, in commemoration of this intervention, Eid al-Adha, animals are ritually sacrificed. There are some countries where this is not allowed, but in many very Orthodox Muslim countries, the sacrifice takes place. The individual family doesn't do it anymore. Generally, you can get someone to do it for you. So they're sacrificed in large groups, and then the meat is distributed to families. Originally, the individual family, generally the father, would make that sacrifice. And whatever remains of the meat is distributed amongst the poor. There's a great deal of emphasis in Islam on social justice and seeing that the poor are taken care of. It's one of the 5 pillars. It's called giving alms to the poor. It's one of the things you're required to do if you are a Muslim. Okay, let's go to two significant rituals that take place during the Hajj. What is the Hajj? The Hajj is the great pilgrimage to Mecca, which is required once in a lifetime for Muslims who can afford it. Most Muslims cannot afford to go to Mecca. A Muslim in a squalor of Calcutta cannot get there. So you're not required to do that. What often happens is if you know someone who's going, you can give them something to take with them, and it will be, in a sense, a symbol of you wanting to be there. So upon arriving in Mecca, and when we talk about people going, how many are we talking about? How many people go to Hajj, would you think? This year they're expecting 2 million. Can you imagine organizing an event for 100? 2 million. I didn't, in this series, I didn't show, there's a whole tent city. There's a tent city that is 3 times the size of Camarillo, where people are put up. But, when you arrive, you go to the great mosque, the Masjid al-Haram. Masjid is Arabic for mosque. This is considered the greatest of all mosques. It's in the center of Mecca. In the middle of the mosque, not the inside, but the grounds, is something called the Kaaba. K-A-A-B-A. It's a square cloth, draped building. And that's not made of cloth. It's draped in the cloth. The literal meaning of the word Kaaba is cube. C-U-B-E. It's believed by Muslims, this is part of the tradition, to have been rebuilt several times throughout history, most famously by Abraham and his son Ishmael. There's a great connection between Abraham, Ishmael, and the Kaaba, Mecca, the Hajj, as we'll see. It is considered to be, quote unquote, the house of God, and is the direction of prayer for Muslims around the world. That's what you're facing. You're facing towards the Kaaba, wherever you are, which is, of course, in Mecca.
So what country is Mecca?
Saudi Arabia.
So you've got 2 different factions of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
They both go, one must be going to the other country.
Yeah, there has been friction in the past, but the Hajj is generally considered one place where you don't have violence. It's also the one place where women can sit with men in prayer. Things tend to break down a little bit. The divisions break down a little bit during the Hajj. Everyone wears a white garment. You don't go in street clothes. You have a special sacred garment which you wear. So when you arrive, what's that? I didn't hear the question. The Kaaba is always there. It would be like in a Buddhist mandala, it's the center. Everything else revolves around it. That's the center of the universe, right there, for a Muslim. So to be able to visit it and moreover, that's the door. That's the door that leads inside the Kaaba. People don't go inside the Kaaba. They generally want to touch the door because it is the house of God. So, that's what they do. Muhammad. Actually, Abraham. Abraham built it. after the story of Abraham and Isaac, or Abraham and Ishmael in the Quran, Hagar and Ishmael go out into the desert. They get lost. Abraham goes to find them, finds them, and then, due to God's miracle, as you will, they build the Kaaba. So that's the center of worship.
And it's never been destroyed.
It's never been destroyed, no. And you're walking around that Kaaba 7 times. That's when you arrive, you go, you put your stuff in your tent. The bus then takes you to the mosque, and this is the first ritual that will take place during the Hajj. It's 7 times counterclockwise around the Kaaba. 7 represents the 7 heavens spoken of in the Quran, when it says, "The 7 heavens and the earth and all beings therein declare his glory." The area around the Kaaba is called the Mataf. If you can see, go down the internet, you can see pictures where there's no one in here. You can get a little better idea of the size. The circling begins at this. It's called the Black Stone. It's the eastern cornerstone of the Kaaba, which, according to several Muslim traditions, dates back to the time of Adam and Eve. The stone was venerated at the Kaaba even in pre-Islamic times. So before Islam came into being, this stone was seen as sacred. One tradition claims that Gabriel himself brought the stone from heaven to be attached to the Kaaba. Now, these are all myths, okay, and you can take them literally, but they have great significance for people. What these are trying to reinforce is this is a sacred spot. This is a sacred spot. Another tradition says it was set intact into the Kaaba's wall by Muhammad in 605 CE, before he had his first revelation. Since then, it has been broken into fragments and is now cemented into a silver frame. See the silver frame? In the side of the Kaaba. As you circle, you're supposed to, if you can, touch it. Now, obviously, if you're in one of the outer circles, no. But what you can do as you walk by is you point. And that's considered the same as touching it. So touching, for a Muslim, for a devout Muslim who goes to Mecca and touches the black stone, I guess that would be the equivalent, for example, for Catholics going and having an audience with the Pope. Or, it's such a sacred moment that you will keep locked in your heart, supposedly, forever. They're also required to say the phrase Allahu Akbar, which means what? You should remember. God is most great. Yeah. Each time they approach the stone. So 7 times around. Eating during the circumambulation is not permitted. But due to risk of dehydration, the drinking of water is allowed. In fact, I was just reading, Hajj takes place, I think, at the end of June. It took place this year, end of June, early July. Do you know what its temperatures are like in Saudi Arabia at that time? Yeah. So, and so there, everywhere throughout the mosque, there are water coolers, which people go to. Although 7 circuits around the Kaaba are traditionally done on the ground level, because of the large crowds. Now, you saw that group. You said, okay, that's a large group, but let's just expand it a bit.
Is that a permanent structure or just...
Permanent. That's a permanent structure. The amount of money that the Saudi government pays for Hajj is almost as much as they pay for Live Golf. They have the resources to, yeah. those tent cities, I mean, they're not just pup tents. They're quite elaborate. So yeah, there are several decks by which you can circle. So during Tawaf, pilgrims also pass this area called the Hatim. It's a crescent-shaped area, as you can see. And it's immediately adjacent to the Kaaba. This is supposed to be the place where it is believed Abraham constructed a shelter for Ishmael and his mother Hagar. After he found them, constructed this, and then Allah will tell him to construct the Kaaba on that spot. So you can see it's right near the Kaaba. Crescent moon is often a symbol of Islam. You'll see it on flags. You'll see it, yes. Yeah. And you notice I said most of the festivals start from one crescent moon to the next. Because what is the crescent moon? It's the beginning. Yeah. So Islam was a new beginning. That was the notion. The completion of the Tawaf is followed by 2 rounds of prayer in the spot known as at the Maqam Ibrahim. You can see the Kaaba in the background there. It's the ancient stepping stone said to have used by Abraham when he built the Kaaba.
How long does it take them to get the call?
That's a good question. I don't know because I haven't done it and I can't do it. Because only Muslims can go to Mecca and the Hajj. Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, it's interesting. The first 2, it's suggested that you, if you can, it gets a little crowded, semi-jog. You're not supposed to be walking slowly. And then the last 5, you're supposed to slow down. I'll have to look. That's an interesting question. I'm sure it'll appear on Final Jeopardy sometime. So I'll have to try and look that up, yeah. So according to tradition, this is where he stepped up. Now this is interesting. What's inside that? Footprints. Those are Abraham's footprints. Right. But it's interesting. Every religious tradition that I've studied has footprints as being important. In Hinduism, there's a big temple in Gaya where the footprints of Vishnu appear. In Buddhism, you find them in Lumbini. You find them in Christianity, just where the place of the ascension, the footprints of Jesus. Does it, some people say, oh, it's not real. Does it matter if it's real? In many ways, what people believe is just as important as whether it's true or not. You can argue back and forth whether it's true. The point is, what's the impact it has for the believer? So it's a very sacred spot. After prayer, pilgrims drink water from what is known as the Zamzam well. It's located just east of the Kaaba, and it's also made available, water is also from the well in coolers around, because everyone can't get to the well. Why is the well important? This is where, it is believed, the well mysteriously appeared to give Ishmael and Hagar water when they were dying of thirst. So the whole sense of the Hajj is sort of the miraculous. Take you out of that common everyday world of how things supposed to operate and put you into a sort of a mystical, magical world. And that's its purpose psychologically and spiritually. And hopefully, if you've done that, you will keep that with you for the rest of your life. Okay. A second significant ritual takes place 2 days later. The whole period lasts up to 6 or 7 days of the Hajj, where pilgrims have returned from a journey to nearby Arafat. So after the Tawaj, they'll go back to their tents. The next day they'll go to Arafat, which is a small mountain, where it was believed where Muhammad gave one of his last sermons before he died. So you walk on foot there, you hear a sermon, and then you come back, And on the way back, you sleep out under the stars overnight, and you gather pebbles. And you're going to use those pebbles, because you're going to use them to stone Satan. You're going to use them to stone Satan. So, do you see the walls there? Those have been constructed. Those are symbolic of Satan. You throw stones at the walls, and they're known as the Jamarat al-Aqaba. The ritual, it's a ritual. It reenacts, if you know your Bible or your Quran, Abraham's pilgrimage to Mecca, so your Quran, where he encountered the devil, just like Jesus encountered the devil, and explained as by the historian al-Azkari as follows. When Abraham left Mina and was brought down to al-Aqaba, the devil appeared to him as a stone heap. Gabriel said to him, "Stone him," said to Abraham, Gabriel. So Abraham threw 7 stones at him so that he disappeared. Then he appeared to him in the middle stone heap. Gabriel said, "Pelt him." So he pelted him with 7 stones so that he disappeared. Then he appeared to him in the little stone heap. So see the 3 of those walls? Gabriel said to him, "Pelt him." So he pelted him with 7 stones, like the little stones for throwing with a sling. And the devil withdrew. Now, you can take this literally. I would say a more educated Muslim would take this symbolically. You're stoning your devil within you. That little voice that's always telling you you're more important than you are, that gives you pride, that gives you hubris, that doesn't allow you to look out for others. And this is a ritual that reminds you of that. So, and you know, the thing that's powerful about a ritual, it isn't just something you think. It's something you do. So it's kinesthetic. So you're throwing these stones, which has an impact on the psyche rather than just abstractly thinking, "Oh, devil, get out of here." Although, you know what, Martin Luther,
Did you slow down and not come back at you? It looks like you throw a stone at a wall, it might come back at you.
No, it'll hit the wall and go down. Before, well, since you've asked that question, up until about 20 years ago, the walls were rather small. And people were actually being able to throw them over and hit people on the other side. So they erected these giant walls.
Did you buy the stones so that they were money-making?
No, the stones, like I said, on your way back from Arafat, there's a great large field where people sleep in the open overnight, and it's filled, there's all sorts of stones and pebbles. You pick those up, and they're collected and taken back. Yeah.
So the 7 stones, is that symbolic for the 7?
Yeah, 7 is a sacred number in a lot of religions, especially in Islam, representing the 7 heavens. So 7, yeah, you throw 7 sevens. Yeah, doing things to the devil that seem sort of strange to us, but I think I've said this before. Martin Luther, the great Martin Luther Reformation leader, he used to say, "When the devil appears to me and is really bugging me, I fart in his face." He was known to be colorful in much of his language. If you've ever read his table talks, they get quite interesting. In any case, so this is a ritual to remove the ego. That's what it's really trying to do. Remove the, or let's say the narcissistic ego, the ego that is over the top. Okay. I want to now turn to one Shia ritual. Reminder, the difference between Sunni and Shia. I'm not going to go into great detail, but it basically revolves around who was to have leadership of the Islamic community after the death of Muhammad. The Sunnis believed that his companions, his close followers who fought close with him from all the different tribes should choose the caliph, to be the next leader. The Shia believed it should have stayed in the bloodline. It should have gone through Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law Ali, and that the Sunni usurped that. And that's been the major difference since the beginning, since the death of Muhammad anyway. And the Sunni are predominant around the world. They're about 75% of the world's Muslims. Shia about 20 to 25. Where are most Shia found? Iraq, Iran, and some of the Gulf states, with spatterings around. But if you go to Iran, it's a Shia country. And this Ashura'a festival comes out of Iran. It's the 10th day of the mourning month, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, when Shia Muslims remember this: the martyrdom that took place at the Battle of Karbala in 680 CE at the hands of the forces of the Sunni Caliph Ibn Ziyad. Hussein was Muhammad's grandson, Ali's son. So when Ali died, Hussein was seen to be the legitimate leader. And they were called imams. The Sunni caliphs always saw them as heretics. So they set out to get Hussein, which they did at this Battle of Karbala in 680 CE. You can see it's located about 60 miles southwest of Baghdad. If any of you can remember back to the invasion of Iraq, when the U.S. forces were going through the various cities as they were approaching Baghdad, they would have gone through Najaf, Karbala, the sacred Shia cities. In fact, I can remember very clearly one of the leaders of one of the squadrons, they got inside too close to the shrine of Ali. And even though these Shia Muslims were anti-Saddam Hussein, said no American presence with guns in this site, and they backed off. Thank goodness. Okay, so Hussein in this battle, it's really a tragedy of immense proportions. Hussein's forces were largely outnumbered. They took heavy losses. Eventually, he was wounded by an arrow in his chest. According to tradition, he got back on his horse, he tried to escape, and a voice came down from the sky saying, "We are satisfied with your deeds and sacrifices." As he grew weaker, he sheathed his sword, got down from his horse, sat up against a tree. The general of the Caliphate army ordered one of his men to cut his throat while he was prostrating in prayer to Allah. Now that's the Shia version. Okay? That's the Shia version. So in some ways, Hussein can be very much compared to Jesus. The sacrifice, the suffering that he went through for his people. There is an interesting connection there, as far as I can see. And since that time, Hussein and his companions have been regarded as holy martyrs by the world's Shia Muslims. Martyrdom is a big thing in Shia Islam. It's a fundamental trope, to be a martyr. Now, can that be exploited? I bet it can. If you offer martyrdom to kids to go to paradise for going into a landmine or something, yeah. But the notion that sacrificing oneself for the greater cause is held as a sacred act. On Ashura, Shias observe a complete day of mourning, M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. This is not a happy day. This is a celebration of mourning. They wear special mourning attire, and you can see this woman here. She's crying. It gets very, very emotional. It gets very emotional. You're not supposed to listen to music or participate in any joyful events. Mourning for the incident began almost immediately after the battle. The following was recorded by Hussein's son, the next imam. It is said that for 40 years, whenever food was placed before him, this is the son, he would weep. One day a servant said to him, "O son of Allah's messenger, is it not time for your sorrow to come to an end?" He replied, "Woe upon you! Jacob the prophet had 12 sons, and Allah made one of them disappear." His eyes turned white from constant weeping. His head grew gray, bent in gloom, though his son was alive in the world. "But I watched while my father, my brother, my uncle, and 17 members of my family were slaughtered all around me. How could my sorrow come to an end?" So this is the Ashura'a commemoration every year of the sorrow one should feel for the sacrifice that the Imam Hussein made. Elegies were written and recited by poets. For example, "He who was a light shining is murdered in Karbala and unburied. Descendant of the Prophet, may God reward you well. May you be spared judgment on the day when deeds are weighed. I swear by God, never will I wish to exchange marriage with you for another. No, not until I am covered," this is another elegy, "covered in the grave, O Hussein, never shall I forget you. He whom they abandoned in Karbala, may God now never water the plains of Karbala." That abandonment, one of his, he didn't have a large number of troops, but one of the contingencies didn't come to his aid. So that, and then that became a symbol for individual guilt. In other words, when you're not living, when you're not living the life of sacrifice, the guilt that follows. And pilgrimage to his gravesite developed only a few years after the martyrdom. The Sunni caliphs tried to prevent it, and some of the shrines were destroyed, but they were always rebuilt. And in 979-80, they were rebuilt, and today, there it is. The shrine of Imam Hussein. It's in Karbala. It's in Karbala, Iraq. Yeah, most of the Shia holy sites are in Iraq. In fact, hundreds of thousands of Iranians will go on pilgrimage to this every year. For many Shia, participation, here are the 4 major events that take place in Ashura. 1, memorial services. 2, public mourning processions, not mourning, mourning. 3, flagellation. And 4, passion plays. So a memorial service at these, mourners congregate at a mosque for sorrowful poetic recitations like you just heard, lamenting and grieving. People scream and cry. You don't hold in your emotions. This is a time to let them go. Beating of drums, chants, "Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein." Religious leaders give sermons with themes of Hussein's purity of spirit, as well as the history of the event. Such sermons allow the listeners to relive, and this is their point, the pain and sorrow endured by Hussein and his family. Very similar to medieval passion plays. This is what was done with Christianity in the medieval. You would have these events, and you would identify with the crucified Christ. You know, today in the Philippines, you still find situations on Easter where people will be put up on a cross. It's not considered proper by most church authorities, but it's a popular response. How to identify with someone who has suffered so immensely for you. It's also believed to clear your sins. That always helps. A popular Shia saying has it, a single tear shed for Hussein washes away 100 sins. Public mourning processions are a common feature of the Ashura festival. This procession, known as the Tuarij, or the Tuarij run, because these people run much of the time, is a ceremony in which participants run, or run, 22 kilometers to the shrine. So it starts off generally as a small group, and as it proceeds towards the shrine, more and more people join in. The 19th century Sayyid Salih Kazini was credited with introducing this run. And on the day of Ashura, the Sayyid recorded the story of the Imam Hussein's martyrdom, with thousands of people listening, after which they started to walk towards the shrine. 1 hour after noon, which is the exact time when Imam Hussein was martyred, the pilgrims entered barefoot into the sacred spot. Following his passing in 1887, his children took it over, so the family every year runs this major event. And there's the inner sanctum. That's the tomb.
Is his body there?
Yeah, his body's in there. Well, at least I think it is. They say it is. It's a good question, though, because his body was unburied initially and taken to Kufa, along with some of the other companions. But it's believed, in any case, that his body is there. Okay. Flagellation, yes, is believed to be a way of directly experiencing Hussein's pain. It's limited to males, generally younger males, and is not always countenanced by Shia leadership. They don't do anything to stop it. They don't suggest that you do it, because it's become a tradition. These young men will march and sing praises to the Imam while either beating themselves with this rod or cutting themselves. Where did this develop? This is interesting. The history of flagellation can be traced back, Shia flagellation, to the 16th century. That was when Shiism became the state religion of Iran. Before that, it had been Sunni. Now, this is what is interesting to me. The Safavids, who were the dynasty that introduced Shiism, forged an alliance with Catholic Europe, Portugal, Venice, and the Habsburg Empire, because they saw an affinity between Catholicism and Shiism as opposed to the Sunnis. Self-flagellation rituals were unknown to the Arabs, but the Shia Safavids seem to have adopted it from the Catholic Church, as flagellation was common in Christian Europe during that era. It's an interesting interplay between religious traditions. Finally, there are the passion plays. They're called tazieh, similar to Christian passion plays in medieval Europe. Tazieh means comfort, condolence, expression of grief. It reenacts the death of Hussein. So you're going to see a little play about the martyrdom of Hussein. It originated in the 17th century. Each year the same story is told. So you would think, okay, spectators aren't going to go because they know the story. Well, how many of you go to a Christmas pageant every year? It's the same story. So it's not the story so much. It's the emotional impact that this has. There are large crowds every year. Today we know that there are 250 separate Tazier pieces. We know that because they were collected by an Italian and brought to the Vatican Library. So if you can find just about anything in the Vatican Library. And of course, that's the tragic scene, which would be comparable to Jesus' crucifixion. Okay, that brings us to the end. Any comments, questions, insights?
But the Shia would still celebrate all these other holidays.
Yeah, the Shia but but Ashura is not a Sunni holiday. Yeah. Keith?
Yes, she touched on it earlier, but so in Christianity, we've got the cross, right? And so we know what that represents. And so the crescent, is it just new moon and new beginning? That's it?
That's what, as far as I know. Yeah, it's the new, starting the new. Religion has been again revealed because they believe in progressive revelation. Religion was revealed to Abraham. And there's a star, yeah. There'll be a star inside the crescent. Yeah, the star. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Do they have the call to prayer during the Hajj?
No. No, they don't have the call to prayer during the Hajj. They may have it when you're outside of Mecca. I'll have to check on that.
It would seem disruptive.
Yeah, it's...
With all the people around.
Right. Let me tell you, things are on schedule there. If you miss the bus, you've missed the bus. You're not going to wait. Yes.
Well, thinking about last Sunday's message that you shared with us, and that God could be inside of each of us, and now we hear that the devil is inside of us. Mm-hmm. No wonder we have so many.
No wonder we have so many. We're divided. We're divided selves. Go to your psychiatrist, he'll tell you that. Okay, well, thank you for coming out. Next week, we will be looking at Hinduism, various rituals in the Hindu religion, and the following week, Buddhism. All right? Thanks for coming.